I work from home as a freelancer, doing architectural visualizations. Deadlines were always a constant companion. A particular night, I was doing my working on the Autodesk software, the digital structure taking shape on the screen. It was midnight and complete silence, just the sound of the computer. Anna, my wife, was sleeping upstairs as she had an early start. Suddenly, the silence was shattered with a doorbell. It was exact 3 a.m. Now, my first thought, illogically, was for Anna. She'll get it. Nonsense thought, without thinking of the current hour and the fact she was sound asleep. But after next second, protectiveness and familiar fear washed over me. No, I couldn't let her. I pushed back from my desk. The chair made a loud, creaky noise in the quiet room. As I reached to the hall area, I saw her standing on the stairs. Anna, sleepy but was already halfway down, rubbing her eye. What was that? She mumbled, her voice thick with the sleep. Stay there, babe, I said, trying to keep my voice even, trying not to look worried. However, anxiety tightening in my stomach. I'll check. My senses are on high alert. The entryway light was on, glowing a weak yellow light, which can be seen through the windows. I watched through peephole. No one was there, little concerned. I took a deep breath, my hand trembling over the doorknob. I laughed. Must be some kids doing a prank. But at this time, I was just diverting my mind from negative thoughts. Stabling myself, I unlocked the door and pulled it open. The cold night air hit me on the face. I stepped out, scanning left and right. The street was empty. No cars, no figures, nothing. Just the eerie stillness of the sleeping neighborhood. Hello? I called out, but in very low voice. Silence. I was about to close the door, as there is no one on the door, and yes, I still have work to finish. But suddenly my gaze drifted downwards. There, right in the middle of the doormat. A ball, bigger than tennis-sized, white-colored rubber ball. The kind a child would play with. My first instinct was to kick it, probably just to roll it over to the neighbor's yard, as their kids are always losing toys. But then, the rational part of my brain. Why now? At 3 a.m. Who's playing with a ball at this hour? I bent down, my fingers brushing against the cool, smooth plastic. It felt out of place, wrong. Still, what else could I do? Leave it there. I picked it up, its lightness surprising me. I stepped back inside, locking the door firmly. Anna was sitting at the bottom stair, her eyes barely open. Who was it? She asked, stifling a yawn. No, just a ball, I said, holding it up. Must be the neighbor's kids. She just nodded, too tired to question it further. Okay. Are you coming back to bed? Soon, I promised. Just need to proofread. She nodded again and walked back to the bedroom. I heard the soft thud of her getting back into bed. I was still in the hallway for a moment, and the ball was also in my hand. It felt strange, almost alien. I placed it on the small table in the hall, not really knowing what else to do with it, and headed back to my office area to check the file in the software. I was checking and correcting my work. Maybe an hour passed. I just clicked the export option to pre-render the work to finalize the file when I heard it, faintly at first, then clearer. An unfamiliar sound, a child's voice, crying. It seemed to be coming from downstairs, from the hall. My blood ran cold. My fingers froze over the keyboard. Every muscle in my body tensed. The house was silent again. Only the sound of the graphic cards fan, which suddenly increased. But the crying. I'd heard it. It was soft, mournful, unmistakably a child's voice. My heart hammered against my ribs. The image of the ball on the table flashed in my mind. Horror, cold and sharp, pricked at my skin. I was completely frozen, staring at my screen, but seeing nothing. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Should I go check? Or was this just my exhausted, traumatized mind playing tricks on me? But the sound, it had been so real. I rose from my chair. I reached the hallway. My eyes stuck to the small table. The ball was gone. Anna, but no reply. My whisper was barely audible. But after a while, the crying of baby came from the bedroom. A fresh wave of terror, sharper this time. I took the stairs 2 at a time. I burst into the bedroom. The bed was empty, the covers thrown back as if someone had just left. Before I could say anything, a voice of crying child now coming from the hall. Downstairs again. My mind reeled. This wasn't possible. My legs feeling unsteady, and made my way back down the stairs. Slower this time. A creeping dread, coiling in my gut. As I reached the bottom, my eyes were drawn back to the small table in the hall, and the ball was there on the table, at the exact same spot, or where it had been before it vanished, but now its color was pure black. My head was spinning. Was I losing my mind? I picked it up. It felt heavier now, like something is now inside it, or maybe it was just the weight of my overthinking. Just as my fingers closed around it, I heard a soft footstep. Anna, watching me sweating, she asked me what happened. I opened my mouth to speak, to tell her about the crying, the disappearing and reappearing ball, the empty bedroom, but the words wouldn't come out. How could I explain something I didn't understand myself? I would sound insane. I said nothing and watched her in confusion. The ball felt cold in my hand. She reached the bottom of the stairs, yawning. She asked again, "Are you coming back to bed?" The same question as before, as if the last terrifying hour hadn't happened. I looked at her, then at the ball in my hand, then back at her sleepy face. The house was silent again, save for the distant hum of my computer still rendering upstairs, and I said yes. I followed Anna upstairs, the black ball still there in my hand. I placed it on my nightstand. Anna falls asleep quickly. Her breathing was deeper now, but my mind raced. After a while, a screechy sound came from downstairs, from the main door. I skipped the beat. Quietly, I came out of bed and overlooked the front yard from the bedroom window. I watched an old lady standing at our main door. Her hair was a mix of long white and black strands, fallen all over her face. In an adrenaline rush, I told myself, this is my house. No one messes with it. I grabbed my mobile, already dialing 911, and rushed downstairs. With a jolt, I flung the door open. No one was there. But then, I saw her at the edge of the lawn, near the bushes. "Hey!" I yelled. She didn't turn, just walked away and vanished in the dark bushes. Chasing her felt like a terrible idea. I'm only 5'6", and the figure I'd just seen was tall, easily 6 or 6'5". Very soon, the police came. I told them only about the tall old lady. They searched the whole area but found nothing. No trace of her, except for one thing. A big red symbol, freshly painted on my front door. It was 4 curved arrows, rotating anti-clockwise, with a solid ball at the center. I don't know what she wanted from us. Despite everything, Anna didn't wake. Didn't she hear the sirens? She still hadn't come downstairs.
I used to work at a place called O'Hurley's General Store in Shepherdston, West Virginia. It was the kind of place that seemed older than time itself. The kind of store where you could buy anything from nails and lanterns to groceries, whiskey, or a second-hand pocket watch. The job wasn't glamorous, but it offered reliable pay, and the customers were usually kind, decent people from a small town. Every now and then a drunk might make a scene when I refused to sell liquor on a Sunday, but nothing worse ever happened. At least, nothing until one night when I came face to face with someone who still makes my skin crawl whenever I think of him. It was a Saturday night, late enough that the streets outside were quiet, and I was stocking shelves and tidying up when the front bell jingled. I walked back behind the counter, ready to help whoever came in, when I first laid eyes on the man in the black jacket with the red t-shirt. His jacket was finely tailored, pressed and sharp, the kind you'd expect on a K-pop artist on a magazine cover. That alone was unusual in our little store. He looked to be around 40 years old, but his style was much younger. but everything else about him was stranger still. His skin was pale, almost sickly white, and his features were so sharp and severe that they hardly looked real. His silver hair, which was clearly dyed, he had the look of someone who belonged anywhere but here. He asked for lighter fluid, and I fetched it for him while trying to make a bit of small talk. He said he was from DC, just passing through. He hinted that he was involved in politics, though he didn't really say what exactly. His words were vague, and his smile was wolfish, like he knew more than he would ever tell. When it came time to pay, he pulled out a roll of bills that must have been thicker than my fist, all hundreds as far as I could see. He peeled one off and laid it on the counter. I gave him his change and made a joke about how if business hadn't been so good earlier, I wouldn't have had enough to cover it. He didn't so much as crack a smile. Instead, he pulled out a silver-plated Zippo lighter, the fanciest I had ever seen, and began filling it with the fluid right there at the counter. I expected him to light a cigarette, but when I mentioned it, he said he didn't smoke. As soon as he finished filling the lighter, a few drops spilled onto his finger. He raised it to his lips and sucked the liquid off like it was nothing. I recoiled without meaning to, startled by the sight of a grown man sipping lighter fluid as though it was sweet tea. He noticed my reaction, grinned wider, and seemed to enjoy the way it unsettled me. Before I could gather the courage to ask him what he was doing, the bell over the door rang again. This time it was a girl, no older than 14. The strangest part was the way she dressed. Her denim skirt had embroidered white flowers, and her shirt looked like something a much younger child would wear. She called him Daddy and asked if there was a bathroom. The man looked at me, and I gave him the key to the store's restroom. Instead of passing it to her directly, he pulled a small black leather wallet from his jacket, placed the lighter, the wallet, and the key together, and handed them all to her. She walked off and locked the bathroom door behind her. That was when a sick feeling settled in my gut. Something about the whole arrangement felt wrong. The girl didn't look anything like him. She had soft, rounded features and curly hair, nothing like his sharp face and silver hair. She was far too old to be calling her father Daddy in that childish way, and the way he handed her the wallet, along with the lighter, gnawed at me. I had a strong suspicion about what was inside, but lacked any solid proof. I tried to distract myself by asking him where they were headed next, but he turned cold. His eyes were nearly black, narrow and piercing, and when he looked at me, it was like he was staring straight through. I shifted behind the counter, nervous under his gaze. His voice stayed calm but carried a quiet warning. He reminded me of the old saying about curiosity killed the cat. He walked the aisles like a man inspecting some strange little relic of a forgotten world. I went back to tidying, though my eyes followed him, waiting for the girl to return. Minutes dragged on, 5, then 10. The bathroom door stayed shut. Just as I was about to ask if he thought she was all right, I heard the snap of the lock. She emerged slowly, not with the briskness of someone who had used the bathroom, but with the sluggish daze of someone half asleep. She handed back the key, the lighter, and the wallet, murmuring her thanks in a dreamy, heavy voice. The way she said Daddy then left no doubt in my mind that he was no father to her. It made my stomach churn, especially when I saw the look he gave her in return. It was the kind of look no man should ever give a girl, least of all one calling him father. My only goal was to see them gone. Around here, we don't usually confront someone head-on, not unless we're looking for trouble. We find ways to make our meaning clear without saying it outright. I wished them safe travels in a friendly voice, but my eyes revealed my true feelings. He looked back at me with a hunger that made me cold all over, as though he was considering whether to tear me apart then and there. He walked to the counter, laid the bathroom key down carefully, and repeated his warning about curiosity killing the cat. Then he led the girl out into the night, and moments later, their car was gone. I stood there for a long while after, unsure what to do. My first instinct was to call the sheriff, but what could I even say? A man had come into my store with a girl who looked like his daughter. That wouldn't be enough to act on. I could have mentioned the wallet, hinted at what I thought it might contain. But I had the strong impression that no matter what we accused him of, he would slip right out of it. The money he carried, the confidence in his manner, and the way he spoke told me he was untouchable. So I said nothing. I finished out my shift in silence, though his words echoed in my mind the whole time. For days afterward, I couldn't shake them. Whenever I thought back to his face, to those eyes like pits of tar, the words came back sharp and clear. Curiosity killed the cat. Even now, all these years later, the memory lingers. I can still see the shine of that silver lighter, still hear the flat tone of his voice, still picture the dazed girl with her childlike clothes and tired eyes. I sometimes wonder what became of her, whether she ever escaped whatever grip he had on her, or if she was lost the moment she called him Daddy. But the truth is, I'll never know. That night, I chose silence. And silence has a way of living with you long after the moment has passed. I used to work at a Pizza Hut in high school. I have a bunch of weird stories from that time, but this one scared me the most. My Pizza Hut was a pickup, only location, and there was a wall between the storefront and the kitchen. If you were in the front, you were pretty much on your own. The store was located at an out-of-the-way shopping center in Atlantic City. This should tell you a lot about our clients. For some reason, I always got stuck on the late shift. Most weekdays, it would be just me and one cook after 10 p.m. I would hang out at the front while the cook waited in the kitchen, out of earshot. One night, I saw a guy walk past. I didn't think much of it and went back to doing nothing. Then the door of the shop opened, and it was the same guy. He was tall but thin like a skeleton. There was something not right about his eyes. I was on edge, but I got up, greeted him, and asked what he'd like to order. He just stood there, staring at the ceiling and muttering. I was only 17 and didn't know what to make of it. Now, I would probably chalk it up to drugs. He stood there muttering in what looked like tongues. Then he abruptly spun around and walked out of the store without acknowledging me. I was unnerved, but I shook it off. My shift was about to end and I was counting down the minutes. Then I realized somebody had walked in. I looked up, and it was the same guy with the same creepy eyes. This time he was holding a phone to his ear and muttering unintelligibly. I realized he wasn't talking to anyone and was staring at me, super intensely. I was getting frightened. He just kept looking at me, so I asked if I could help him. He started walking towards the counter, still looking at me. Then he suddenly asked, in a perfectly normal voice, if his order was ready. I didn't know how to answer, so I told him honestly that he had not ordered anything the first time he was in. He got this bug-eyed look and lunged at the counter, and I jumped back. My heart was pounding. I thought, this guy is not sane and is gonna pull out a knife and stab me. Then, just as absurdly, he lunged. He yelled, "God damn it," and looked as if he was gonna cry. He put his head in his hands and started pulling at his hair. I started feeling bad for this guy. I asked politely and nicely if he wanted to order something now. His head quickly went up, and on his face, there was no expression. He looked deranged. I held still, afraid that moving would set him off. Thankfully, the door swung open, and a large man stepped inside. He glanced at the guy, puzzled, sensing that something was off. The crazy guy looked at him, then at me, and started backing up until he was out the door. He walked to the edge of the storefront, looking at me the whole time, and then was gone. The other guy looked at me and asked, "What the hell was that?" I just said that I had no idea at all, and thought the guy was crazy. I tried to shake it off, but was totally on edge. When I clocked out, I made one of the drivers walk out with me. Then I jumped in my car and got the hell out of there. I never saw that dude again. It was a strange and unnerving experience. I don't know what he would have done if that guy had not walked in. When I was 18, I worked the front desk at my college's residence building, and I think I was almost assaulted or murdered. but you can be the judge of that. During the summer, the building also operated as a hotel. 2.5 floors were for hotel guests, while the other half of the third floor was for student housing. The entire building used a fairly outdated hotel swipe key system, and the door locks were all powered by 4A batteries. If the batteries died, replacing them and reprogramming the door was a lengthy process. One night, while I was working an overnight shift around 1 or 2 a.m., a dark-haired guy came to the front desk from inside the building. He said he had left his key card in his room. I made him a new one, which was my first mistake. Hotel guests could have as many keys remade as they wanted. Students were supposed to get a temporary card and be charged $2. After giving him the new key, I asked his status, student or hotel guest, and he confirmed he was a student. At that point, I should have checked our system to charge his account, but I was busy with administrative tasks and forgot. I used to trust people too easily at that job, but I quickly learned not to. Later that night, around 3 or 4 a.m., he returned to the desk and said he couldn't get into his room. I asked if he had forgotten his key again, but he explained that the door itself wasn't working. When I asked if the light came on when he swiped the card, he said it did not, so I figured the batteries were dead. I told him I would have to change them and went up to his room with him. On the way, he asked for my name, and I told him. However, he never gave me his. I used a master key to open the door manually. I told him I would need to prop it open while I worked on the back panel. He insisted that it was okay, and that he would close it. He did, promptly shutting and deadbolting the door. It was very weird, but I tried not to overthink it. I had changed batteries on many doors. Some students were uncomfortable having their rooms on display. He also had a very thick accent. I thought it could be a language barrier issue. Despite my attempts to rationalize it, I had a strong feeling that something was wrong. I tried to ignore it so I wouldn't alarm him. I focused on fixing the door as quickly as possible. While I worked, he kept trying to lure me further into the room. He claimed his bed was broken and needed me to look at it. He then said something needed to be fixed underneath it. He held out a small gold house key and announced he had a key. He then threw it under the bed, telling me to go get it. He also mentioned a leak under the fridge. He was constantly inventing problems to try and get me down on the ground. I refused each time. I told him I would send maintenance in the morning to look at any broken items. With my back to him, he asked if I would take off my glasses. I told him no, explaining that I needed them to see. His tone of voice suddenly changed, in a steady, chilling manner. He told me my name and said it was okay. He said I could take them off. He then reached around from behind me and tried to remove my glasses himself. I swatted his hand away. While trying to keep my composure, I told him again that I had to keep my glasses on. Though he was thoroughly creeping me out, I didn't want to be rude, risk angering him, or get into trouble if he complained. I stood up to get something from the repair kit. I undid the deadbolt and opened the door in the process. He lunged toward the door to shut it again. He told me to keep it closed. I refused, explaining that I had to keep it open to reprogram it from the outside. While I held the door open with my foot and looked through the kit, he started playing with the wispy hairs on my forehead. He also tried to touch my shoulder. I pushed him away again, told him not to touch me, and focused on leaving. He tried one last time to get me to follow him into the bedroom, saying the bed was broken. I went as far as the door frame to see if I could spot a problem. That's when I realized his room was completely empty. There were no dishes, no shower curtain, and no sheets on the bed. He had nothing. This wasn't his room. My mind went back to the international student theory, thinking he might have just arrived and hadn't bought anything yet. But deep down, I knew something was seriously wrong. I fiddled with the door for a few more seconds before announcing it was fixed. Then, I quickly gathered my tools and left. Before I reached the elevator, he came out of the room with his shoes on and started to follow me. He then called out my name, claiming the door wasn't fixed and that I needed to come back. I returned, opened the door for him with the master key. I told him that if it was still broken, I would have to send maintenance in the morning. I knew he would follow me to the elevator again, so once he was inside the room, I closed the door and ran down the stairwell as fast as I could. When I got to the front desk, I checked the computer and confirmed my fear. The room he was in was supposed to be empty. It was assigned to neither a student nor a hotel guest. I locked myself in the back office and called campus security. A few minutes later, he came down and walked behind the front desk. Knowing he wasn't a resident, I yelled at him to get on the other side and wait. He tore the corner off a piece of paper on the desk. He drew a flower on it and placed it back on my papers. When security arrived, he ran back up to the empty room. He tried to convince them he lived there. He kept showing them the key, which had somehow started working again. The guards escorted him downstairs and asked me if he was a resident, crying and terrified. I told them that he obviously did not, and that was why I had called them. He kept interrupting to argue that he did live there, but he couldn't even recall his room number when asked. Security requested his student card, which he couldn't produce. They told him he had to leave if he couldn't prove he lived there. While they took his information, I listened from the office. I could tell he was lying. The phone number he gave was just random digits. He hesitated before giving a name as if he were inventing one on the spot. When asked for his address, he just said he lived across the street. The guard asked if he meant the apartments across the street, and he said yes, but he couldn't provide a building number. He claimed his apartment number was 1200. I moved into that building a few months later, and apartment 1200 doesn't exist. When security asked why he was sneaking into a room, he just fidgeted. He claimed he had no reason and was just there. They asked if he was visiting a friend or there to hurt someone, but he kept repeating that he didn't know. At one point, he tried to claim he was my friend. This made me poke my head out of the office to state that I had never seen him before that night. He eventually left. We didn't call the police because he hadn't actually done anything criminal, but it was incredibly unsettling. Later, it dawned on me how he might have known the room was vacant. A few days after the incident, a housekeeper told me she had found that same room's door dead-bolted open with the TV on and another housekeeper inside watching it. She must have forgotten to lock up when she left for the night. The man must have found the open door when he let himself into the building. I never saw him again, and to this day, I have no idea what his intentions were. I haven't worked there since last winter, and overnight shifts still give me the heebie-jeebies. For the past 2.5 years, I worked the night shift as a security guard at a local bar in San Francisco. Over that time, I had seen countless incidents, from petty arguments to full-blown brawls. Handling them had become second nature, like mediating a disagreement between children. My coworker, Robert, seemed to feel the same way. One night, we were working our usual post, standing in front of the bar's entrance checking IDs, when 4 well-dressed men approached. They exuded an air of wealth. This particular bar required reservations, and we enforced the rules strictly, regardless of who you were. These guys didn't have reservations, so we denied them entry. They didn't take us seriously and tried to bribe us with money. I've always tried to follow a righteous path, so I rejected their offer without a second thought. I looked at Robert, and for a moment, I got the impression he was tempted. He just followed my lead, but he seemed hesitant. My feelings about that didn't matter though, because the men started threatening and swearing at us. One of them grabbed my collar. I had the authority to take them down, but I preferred to handle things with minimal violence. I pulled his hands away and politely told him to stop. Another man, who was clearly a gym enthusiast, stepped forward and said, in a show-off manner, that they would crush us like bugs if we didn't let them in. The commotion drew the manager outside. He demanded to know why we couldn't handle the situation. I told them they didn't have a reservation, and they started making a scene when we refused to let them in. The manager tried to calmly explain the rules of the bar, but the men threw 2 bundles of cash at his face. The money hit him hard, making his nose bleed. He looked at me and said to handle it, by any means necessary. Robert rushed to his side and took him back inside. The manager was a 26-year-old with a nasty temper and the son of the bar's owner. He was an egoistic rich brat who liked to keep his hands clean and let others do his dirty work. I understood what he meant by any means necessary, but I didn't want to go that far. I simply used force to remove the men from the property, giving them a final warning. They left after cursing and making more empty threats. When I went back to my post, Robert came outside and told me the manager was calling for me. As soon as I entered the manager's office, he asked if I had done as he said. I replied that I had removed them from the property, looking down as I spoke. The manager, taking a sip from his glass, asked how many years I had been working for him. I said it had been 6 years. He then asked if I still didn't understand what he had meant, implying he would spell it out if he had to. I stayed silent, still looking down. He noticed my silence and continued saying he didn't want the men to see the next sunrise. I hesitated, pointing out that they seemed wealthy and it could cause problems. The manager laughed and said that only one of them, the fragile-looking one in the back, was rich. His father worked for the manager's father in their company and the others were just mooching off him. He told me that I knew what to do and to get to it. Then he went to the back of the bar. I returned to my shift, my mind racing with thoughts of whether or not to follow the order. I knew he couldn't fire me if I didn't do it because I had too many of his secrets. After my shift ended, I was on my way home when I decided to park my car and walk to a nearby convenience store. The men suddenly surrounded me in the secluded area, thinking they could take me down. The gym enthusiast from before came forward, cracking his knuckles. He taunted me, saying he had warned me he would crush me like a bug, and that now was the time. I sighed loudly at his words. He swung his arm at me, but I grabbed and twisted it. I muttered that I had decided not to kill them, but they weren't making it easy for me to live a righteous life. I pulled out my gun and shot the 2 men standing in front of me in the knees so they wouldn't run. The third man, who looked like a pipsqueak, didn't run despite not being shot. All of them looked terrified. I told them with disappointment in my voice that I had warned them to never show up again if they wanted to live. Their horrified expressions made it clear they had thought my words were an empty threat. I shot the gym enthusiast in the head, which made the others scream in terror. I walked over to the men I had shot in the knees, stepped on their injured legs, and told them that I had been going to let them live. But they had now made me angry. I shot each of them in the head, then turned to the pale-faced man the manager had told me to keep alive. I told him he was lucky and that he got to live, but I then changed my mind and said he would wish he hadn't. I told him he was coming with me. I forced him into the back seat of my car and tied him up. I eventually managed to squeeze all the bodies into the trunk. I pulled out the cleaning supplies I always carried and got to work. I cleaned up all the blood and other traces of the murder from the scene. When I was done, I called the manager. He sounded out of breath, and I could hear the moaning of a woman in the background. I told him the task was done. He started laughing maniacally, and the woman's voice suddenly got louder. He said, "Well done," and then hung up. I sighed deeply and ran a hand through my hair, wondering why my mother had named me Lucifer.